Okay, well, is it possible that you might actually have ADHD and not even know about it, that it wasn't diagnosed?
Could you do me a favor? Could you start that over?
Exactly. It's a good sign right there, huh?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, when does that usually happen that somebody gets diagnosed? You have to go in and sit with a therapist? Who is it that officially diagnoses whether or not you have ADHD or not?
It's a great question. I would act like I know and make up some kind of answer, but then the medical community is going to get so mad at me, Virginia.
I'm just kind of curious about it because it is something that, it seems rampant. It seems like you're almost odd if you don't have ADHD.
Every one of those body cam videos I'm always talking about, and we get a lot in Palm Beach County, my friends, but people get pulled over and it's usually a DUI stop. Mm-hmm. 3 out of 4 times, I have ADHD. I have ADHD.
Yeah.
And that's always the claim they say, but you're also drunk. So
and speeding.
Right.
And you can't, I don't get it.
Does your ADHD make you speed and turn a lot?
I think when people say that, they think the cops are going to go, oh, okay, all right, you're cool.
Does it make you want to drink and drive? Is that one of the symptoms of ADHD? It's kind of odd. Jaybird was looking at this article on the possibilities of undiagnosed ADHD and what some of the signs might be. It says you lose control of your emotions during disagreements with your partner. Okay. It says you feel hypersensitive to feedback from your partner.
Can this also be a work partner?
Maybe.
Quit your bitching.
You unintentionally interrupt when your partner is talking. Okay, ADHD. You may feel particularly irritated when your partner breaks your focus. You procrastinate on household chores or other tasks. You go to bed much later than your partner, or you're always thinking of gestures to bring passion and fun to your relationship. Okay. I don't know.
I don't know either. And I'm sure someone listening right now who's more versed in this subject could maybe help us out. But I thought that was kind of, because what if you really are with somebody and you're trying to get something done and they keep breaking your focus? You're going to get kind of annoyed by that.
Anybody would.
Yes.
ADHD or not.
Maybe if you have more than 3 or 4 of those symptoms, you should look into it.
Possibly. I don't even know really what the signs are. I one time had been at a therapist and she tried telling me that I did, but I didn't know why.
You weren't paying attention.
Not really, no. So
I couldn't focus on what she was saying.
Well, if you do, like, what do you do? I mean, I don't want any of the medicines that supposedly they give you to fix it, right? Is that where what is Ritalin for? Is that for the ADHD stuff?
I'm not sure about that, but I do know that Adderall is tied to the ADHD thing. And, people who don't have ADHD, let's not kid ourselves. There's an Adderall problem out here. People take Adderall all the time acting like it's my ADHD, making them sound like a crackhead at times.
Right.
It's not always the end all be all, and there's absolutely an abuse of it.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of thinking, and she kind of started going down that path with me, and I was like, well, how's it, so what am I going to do differently in my life? I don't want to take any kind of medications or anything like that, so, I've been living all right.
Don't they give you, something to fill out, ask you questions if you're experiencing any of that, and they look it over, and then they sit down and talk to you?
I don't know. I think every therapist is different, and I think there's some better than others. Some, you just walk in and tell them a few symptoms, and they can't wait to write you a prescription.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. Kay had said here, she said, it gets diagnosed in women and girls significantly less. So there's a whole group of adult women out there who have just learned how to cope with it because they were never diagnosed as kids. Not that everybody needs to be medicated, but it's nice to know so you can work through the issues. And yeah, I think that's probably how I feel about it. And I try to really pay good attention to how my mind works and how everything happens in my brain and try to offset and adapt things in my life, knowing that they need to be a certain way with the way I think and the way I process. And so that's really about all I could do. To me, if somebody diagnosed me with ADHD, I don't know how it would change my life. I don't know how to do anything different on the day-to-day.
Well, at this point, you know you, and so you're functioning fine.
Well,
Yeah.
you also have a lot focusing on with the show, and if you're comparing show Kev versus personal life Kev,
Right,
I
yeah.
think those are two different things.
No, absolutely.
If you're not paying attention to your wife and all those things in your personal life, I would be concerned. You're doing a lot over here.
Does it feel like to you that a lot of people love to collect diagnosis?
Oh, 1,000,000%, and they're all in my family.
Or they want to be able to say, I have ADHD, I have blah, 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 I have blah, blah, blah.
Panic disorder.
Yeah, and so anything that kind of goes off in their life, they have a whole litany of excuses to say, well, you can't blame me because I got blah, blah, blah.
I've got a few relatives up there in the old Rhode Island state that love to do that. I have this, I have that, I have this, and I have that. So you cannot ever get mad at me.
They must, when they get the diagnosis, be so pumped. They can be, yes, yes,
I
ADHD,
knew it.
yes.
I'm
all
allowed
right.
to be mean to you because I have this and I have that.
It's almost like they put together a resume that they want to hand you when you meet. Be like, oh, by the way, I've got 10 things wrong with me. So here it is, and here's my limitations. So drive carefully. So, yeah, it's interesting. If you do have it, like, how did you know? And did it change your life? Is there anything that you did differently by knowing that you have it? And that's, I guess, my ultimate question. Does it really benefit you to get the diagnosis to know that officially you do have it? Or is your life basically the same? You just know, oh, okay, well, I got ADHD and maybe it explains the way my brain works.
Yeah, and I don't want people to get it twisted. I think medication's important if you absolutely need it, but to act like there's not a, overuse of it would be not true.
Yeah. Kay was also saying, too, my husband was diagnosed with ADHD, has had it since he was a little kid, and he absolutely does nearly all those things that you were just talking about. And it's wild when he's unmedicated.
Really?
Yeah, and that's why I've seen people. I mean, my dad, my grandmother, they are people. My dad has to be medicated. And
For sure.
when he's not, it's a wild ride, And so that's why I never thought that I needed anything. But again, maybe in your own mind, you're like, I'm completely normal and fine. I don't need any. What do you mean I don't need medication? I'm okay. But that's always been my thought. I'm like, until somebody taps me on the shoulder, be like, hey, dude, you really need to see somebody about some medicine, man.
Look, ignorance is bliss.
Yes, exactly.
You do you, boo.
Can you tell pretty quickly if your dad's off meds?
Yeah, there's some signs. You see it with your mom, Virginia.
Yes.
I know. It's almost. I remember with my grandmother. You could look at her eyes, and you could tell. That's why I've talked a bit about Brittany sometimes. And I grew up from a very young age, almost like as a defense mechanism, because with my grandmother, you never knew. And so you would walk in, and then sometimes you walk in, you see Granny's eyes, you'd be like, uh-oh. Oh, boy, I need to get Mom. Yeah, because you just knew right away you're on for a wild ride. And it's crazy. There is something about the eyes. I don't know what it is. It's just tching.
Oh, yeah.
They flip, and they are different, and you could see that. So, yeah, she said he takes a non-steroidal drug, and it's not like Adderall where it can be addicting. And it is a game changer. Yeah. So I think for the most part, until somebody says, hey, you got to get on something, I'm just living my life.
Yeah, if me and Virginia come to you and go, dog, you need some medication, that's when you know you're...
Yeah, you're right.
We think you're fine, but we're crazy.
The first thing you should say, though, is how dare you? Because you guys need to be meted up, too.
How could anybody give anybody mental health recommendations on this show?
On this show, no.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to a second source on that. Jessie had sent an email. She said, I love today's segment on ADHD. I grew up a lot when a lot of boys were being diagnosed, but my parents thought it was a fake disorder and just an excuse for bad behavior. Well, my husband, now 40, was diagnosed with ADHD in kindergarten, and he was medicated through part of middle school. He still shows most of the symptoms you mentioned. Well, fast forward last year, our bright, happy daughter, then in first grade, was struggling in school, losing confidence. Knowing ADHD is genetic, we had her tested, a 4.5-hour session, 15-page report later, and she was diagnosed with ADHD, anxiety, and depression. Reading depression broke my heart.
Aww.
Thankfully, we found a medication that works. She's now thriving in second grade and will likely be in the gifted program next year.
Oh, good for her.
Our 6-year-old son was also diagnosed. He knew the material but struggled to sit still and produce at school. Nearly had to repeat kindergarten. Early testing and support have made a huge difference for both kids. I'm now officially the only non-ADHDer in the house. It's been challenging but rewarding to find new systems that work for us. Even if my mom, who once thought ADHD was fake, still judges. #I roll. At the end of the day, my kids are thriving, and that's what matters most.
Aww.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Also, Amanda said, I have ADHD. I was diagnosed with it as a kid, never took meds for it, and I learned to deal with it. There are days that are worse than others, but I learned to keep focusing as much as I can and take notes. Also, Mary Jane helps a lot.
How do you know if what's the difference then? Can't you also have just anxiety or depression as well?
Yeah, I think so, and I've not put a lot of time into it. To me, I thought, well, what's the difference? I don't want to medicate. That is one of my big things. I'm not a fan of it, and I'm living. I'm surviving. I just know that, for instance, hey, you can't answer your phone. You can't pay attention to Jaybird's question 10 seconds before your life's but things like that. You just know your own limitations, which I think we do in anything that you have. You know your limitations.
You do, and I think the toughest thing for that is to be honest with yourself and go, this is these are the cards I got. What's the best way with this these cards, how to make this work? But you got to be honest sometimes, and that can be kind of tough.
The hardest thing is when people don't understand what you have to do to make things, and they think that you're either standoffish or you're rude or
Kevin is a deck.
Right. Things like that. And you're like, look, I would love to.
I'm trying to focus.
Right. You don't understand how challenging it is for me to get my thoughts to go linear.
You're right about that. A lot of times people, my whole entire life, no one ever has understood why I can't walk in front of large structures or why I have to go 15 minutes this way when it would only take Virginia 5, mainly because she's speeding. But no, but I'll have to go different alternate routes sometimes because I know you don't want to go over that bridge. You don't want to do it this way. That is hard for people to understand. Mm-hmm. They don't get that.
But that's a lot too. And then that's just trying to navigate all that in your brain.
Yeah, and then trying to tell somebody that and explain that. They go, "Oh, you're fucking lying." People will think you're lying about some of that shit.
Yeah,
like you're saying. So it is hard when you've got something that people don't seem to understand, but you internally know. But this is how it is. They swear.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's kind of it. I got an email from Robert, and he said, I don't know if you remember me emailing you a while back regarding ADHD and how the majority makes the minority of us look just terrible for the most part. I wanted to start by saying even myself diagnosed with that and autism, there's nothing wrong with needing medication. However, I have been without it for 2 weeks, and adults with real ADHD learn how to manage with or without, but Jaybird's list is pretty on point. Even if we're not hyper emotional at that moment, our feelings about things can be so much more intense, and sometimes this means getting emotional about certain topics, as well as getting overstimulated and hyper focusing on how to improve certain things, causing us to lack in other departments. It's a daily struggle. Unfortunately, Palm Beach doctors probably do write a little extra for those over on the island who pretend to need it just to get out of bed, which causes those who really do need it to get out of bed to suffer.
Yeah, and I don't want to mix up my words because I was talking about how I do think there's an Adderall problem, but I'm talking about people who are abusing it, who don't need it. It's become a party drug for some people.
Right.
And that's what I'm talking about. I think to that emailer's point, you can con a doctor, or they don't give a shit. You can get medication on some of that stuff. And I just have seen too many things in my personal life where somebody over abuses and they act. It doesn't help them. It's actually hindering them.
They act squirrely.
Yes, it's not. You're not making progress. You're going back.
Yeah.
This is how we do. It's the KBJ Show.